We've all seen them, right? Business strategies that look absolutely brilliant on a PowerPoint slide. They're packed with these impressive charts and big, bold statements. But then, when they actually hit the real world, they just crumble. And the reason is pretty simple. A strategy that hasn't been properly battle-tested isn't really a strategy at all. This quote from Roger L. Martin, it just hits the nail on the head. Real strategy is supposed to feel uncomfortable. It forces you to make some really tough, explicit choices about what your company will do, and maybe even more importantly, what it won't do. So if the whole process feels easy, you're probably just making a fancy to-do list, not a real strategy. So that really is the big question, isn't it? How do you take a comfortable plan and turn it into a powerful, resilient strategy that actually works? Well, we're about to walk through a 4-part journey to show you exactly that. How to pressure test your plan, build the right muscles to execute it, and make sure it's all perfectly lined up for success. Okay, let's start with a really crucial sanity check. Before you can even think about testing your strategy, you have to be absolutely sure you have one in the first place. So in part 1, we're going to look at these common comfort traps that so often get mistaken for actual strategic thinking. All right, here's your first test. Take a hard look at your strategic plan. Is it like a 50-page document that lists dozens and dozens of initiatives for every single department? I mean, that might feel really comprehensive, but honestly, it's usually a sign that you're avoiding the hard work of making actual choices. A huge list of activities is not a strategy. In fact, it's often just a distraction from what really matters, winning with customers. The fix? Force yourself to be clear. Boil your entire plan down to just one single page that answers 2 simple but profound questions. Where are we going to play, and how are we going to win? And that brings us to the next question, which is often even tougher. If your strategy is really about making choices, then it has to involve trade-offs. So what if you explicitly decided to say no to? Think about strategy like sculpting. An artist creates a masterpiece not just by adding clay, but by chipping away all the stuff that doesn't belong. It's the same idea here. If you haven't explicitly said no to certain opportunities or markets or customers, you haven't really made a choice. Defining the territory you won't enter gives you this razor-sharp focus on the territory you're actually trying to conquer. All right, so now that we've got a real strategy in hand, it's time to find its hidden weaknesses. In this next part, we're going to borrow some incredibly effective pressure testing techniques that have been sharpened over centuries by, of all places, the US military. We're going to dive into 4 really powerful methods: building what's called situational awareness, developing an outside-in perspective, basically wargaming your plan, and putting together diverse strategic groups. The whole point of these is to poke holes in your plan before your competition does it for you. First up is situational awareness. Now, this isn't science fiction. These alternate realities are just structured what-if scenarios. What if a competitor makes a totally unexpected move? What if the entire market suddenly shifts? The key here is to define specific triggers ahead of time. These are clear signals that tell you, hey, that alternate reality is happening now, so you can pivot without hesitating. Next, let's ask a really interesting question that comes from military history. For decades, aircraft were just used for spying, for reconnaissance. Then someone had the bright idea that they could be used for offense, and it changed warfare forever. So what's your organization's aircraft? What asset, maybe it's your data, your distribution network, a unique process, is just seen as a cost right now, but could be transformed into a powerful competitive weapon? This third technique is to game it out. The pharmaceutical giant Merck is brilliant at this. They create these internal red teams to act like their competitors, give them real data, and then basically pay them to try and beat Merck's own strategy. And the why here is so important. It simulates the intense, messy, unpredictable pressure of the real market, but in a safe space. It lets them find their weaknesses before they become really expensive failures. So, having a battle-tested strategy is absolutely essential, but let's be honest, it's worthless if your organization can't actually pull it off. So let's move on to part 3 and talk about building the right capabilities, or as I like to call them, your execution muscles. So what exactly are capabilities? Well, you can think of them as the bridge that connects your strategic plan to your actual results. And this is a really important distinction. It's not just about hiring smart individuals who have certain skills. It's about embedding the right skills and processes and knowledge into your teams so that the organization itself gets good at something. That's how you create a real, durable competitive advantage. And here's how you build those muscles in the real world. Instead of making capability building some separate, boring training exercise, the food manufacturer, Rich Products, wove it directly into the work. It's like a team learning to build an engine by, well, actually building the engine. Their teams working on new products were also responsible for improving the company's ability to innovate. They learned by doing, strengthening that muscle while still getting results. We are on the home stretch now. So your strategy has escaped those comfort traps, you've pressure tested it, and you're building the muscles to execute. The very last step, part 4, is a simple but incredibly powerful check to make sure everything is pulling in the exact same direction. Okay, here's the first of 2 quick diagnostic questions. Just think about it for a second. Your purpose is your North Star. It's your why. Your strategy is your how. Are those 2 things in sync? A low score here can mean you're working really, really hard, but you're heading to the completely wrong destination. And the second question connects your strategy to your organization. So you have your how, but do you have the who and the what to actually make it happen? This is all about your people, your culture, your structure. Because if your organization can't deliver on your strategy, then that strategy is pretty much worthless. Now, when you plot the answers to those 2 questions on this matrix, you get this incredibly powerful snapshot of your company's health. It tells you immediately where you stand. Are you up there in the top right with the best chance of winning? Or are you, maybe in that bottom right quadrant, boldly going nowhere? Let's look at what each of these really means with a couple of real-world examples. The top right, this is where everybody wants to be. Think of a company like ARM, the microprocessor designer. Their whole strategy revolves around technical innovation, and their entire organization, from its structure to its culture, is built to support that. Everything is perfectly in sync. Now consider this really dangerous quadrant. Kodak had a world-class organization, perfectly capable of executing their strategy of making the world's best film. The problem? That strategy was completely out of sync with the digital world, so they were perfectly executing a plan that was leading them straight off a cliff. And finally, the bottom left, total misalignment. The Royal Bank of Scotland famously had a strategy of not having a strategy. They just relied on these aggressive, opportunistic moves. At the same time, their organization grew so huge and complex, it became basically ungovernable. And the result of all that was a spectacular collapse. So there you have it, a 4-step framework to go from a fragile plan to a really resilient strategy. We've escaped the comfort traps, we've used military-grade pressure tests, we've focused on building those execution muscles, and we ran a final alignment check. The result is a strategy that won't just survive contact with reality, it'll actually thrive on it. So I'll just leave you with one final question to put this all into practice. What's the first trigger you'll start tracking tomorrow to make sure your strategy stays on course?